Hi, we are the team data analyst, and in this article review, we are going to talk about big data, big decisions, the impact of big data on board level decision making. So these are the team members. We are 5 in total. Now, what are we going to talk about in this article review? Apart from the introduction, we will be talking about limitations and future research, theory, methodology, findings, conclusion, and also discussion. Now, when we are talking about big data, we all know that it is useful today in industries and companies. And according to this article, it can be a big factor that can be used in making decision, and not any simple or small decision, but a broad level decision, a kind of decision that determines the strategy of a whole company for years to come. So this is one of the most important decisions the board members can make. And the idea is to base their decision on the use of big data. However, big data has a potential to disrupt or to affect heavily the decision-making process of senior management. So the question is, to what extent can big data be used, and how can it be used in making decisions at the senior level management while making strategic decisions? So in this article, there are 3 findings that are related to cognitive capabilities. And the first one is cognitive biases and cognitive overload. And the second one is there are challenges that the board members are facing when they make the choice to accept the concept of big data in the decision making of senior management. And the third is the impact of big data on a concept of responsibility and control within senior teams. So, what is the method being used here? Well, the method is a qualitative research approach, and it is based essentially on interviews being conducted with key players or informants. And these informants are managers, directors of these companies selected for the research, and they are all directly involved in big data uses, as this is related to their decision making. And apart from qualitative research method use, an inductive and deductive approach also is used, because the interviews was adopted. This process was used for the interview so that it enables an evaluation of the views of the board directors on the big data's impact on their strategic decision making. So an inductive and deductive approach is also used apart from the qualitative research. But the qualitative research is the main methodology tool used. And then apart from that, a semi-structured interview were also conducted. But however, it was done in such a way that without any specified limitation in mind was adopted, so that the results got are not biased. Now, lastly, a secondary data analysis was made, and this analysis was based on a secondary data collected. So where have they taken this secondary data from? Well, since only companies were involved, organizations were involved in this research, the secondary data was collected from their annual reports, corporate governance reports, or social corporate sustainability reports, or even from company websites, their annual general meeting reports, and also from their minutes and transcriptions, or meeting minutes and transcription. And most importantly, from their press reports from 2008 to 2017, almost 10 years. So all these were taken into account, analyzed, evaluated by the team of researchers. Though they have these extensive tools and approach and data collected, there are some limitations in the research, because the research, first of all, is based on the qualitative research, so it is not quantitative. So the findings cannot be generalized to all sectors, and also this is due to the fact that the empirical data collected from the respondent could easily be biased because of their personal agendas. So this is a kind of limitation. Now, for that reason, the authors of the article or of the paper make some proposal, 3 in total. So the first one is to make a study of the different impacts of big data on different organizations from different sectors. So in a nutshell, they are proposing that the study that will be made in the future should be focused on different sectors, not on few sectors only, so that it brings a kind of validation to the findings. Secondly, they propose a further study that will establish a relationship between big data and corporate governance processes. And thirdly, they suggest for future methodology of case study that will aim to provide richer empirical study that will be analyzed. So these are the 3 proposals that the authors made as to any future studies that will be made. Now, what is the theory behind this paper, or behind the research found in the paper? Now, first, it is good to know that the research approach for the paper was based on knowledge-based view, KBV. And this paper explores the key determinants of knowledge at 3 levels. So the first level is about the director or individual level. And this is about managerial cognitive capabilities. And the second level is the board level. It's mainly about behavioral factors. And the third level is the stakeholder level. So these are the key determinants of knowledge that are listed in 3 levels. Now let's come again up to the methodology being used in this research. We said earlier on that the approach uses a qualitative research and based on interviews. So the interviews were audio recorded and transcribed, and the length of each interview is basically from 90 to 115 minutes. So an information was also collected about the key informants, and those we meant here by key informants are directors, company managers that are interviewed. So their current and previous roles or duty were noted down, and also the profile of their organization and then the role they are playing in the board was also noted down. But one thing that is very interesting is that to prevent any biases in the research, at a point in time, these key information were hidden so that the researcher will not know exactly or specifically who is saying hot. And then the use of these multiple sources. We were talking previously about secondary data being collected. So by using all these sources and research methodology, it helps to validate the data collected and then also bring a kind of trustworthiness to the findings that these researchers are going to get at the end of the research. Now, let's talk about the findings. So what are the findings from this research? There are basically three main findings. The first one, or these three findings, are based in three categories. So the first category is the cognitive capabilities. So what are the findings about cognitive capabilities? The effectiveness of the big data, we know, relies heavily on the data itself, and then also on the ability to mine or to explore this data. And that is what basically data scientists do. But then there are also three interlinked sub-themes that are seen here, and that can have impact on strategy decision making. So the first sub-theme is a shortfall in cognitive capability, and this is about a lack of necessary skills and manpower to build and maintain the big data. And you could clearly see that this is a problem for these managers because they are not necessarily trained as data scientists or data analysts. So they lack the necessary skills to do this. And in some organizations, they even lack the manpower to build and to maintain the big data. Now, the second sub-theme is cognitive biases. One thing that you can note here is that there is a poor understanding of big data, and for that reason, those who are making decisions at the top level or as senior managers, they are really cautious and they don't want to dive into something that they don't know very well. So they just prefer to use their old way of working. The old technique and approach that they have been using, they prefer to use that one rather and not to use the big data making decision. Now, the third sub-theme is a cognitive overload. Well, there is a sharp contrast between the big data that is being collected because there's a huge amount of data being collected and decision makers find it difficult to mine or to explore this data. And of course, it is time consuming, so it also discourages them to use them. But however, one other finding that is very interesting is the secondary data that are collected during the research. Why? These secondary data confirm or try to validate the findings that this paper is listing. Now, the second category of finding is the board cohesion. What are the findings there? It's about the information system that these companies are equipped with as far as big data are concerned. These systems are old, and if you use them to analyze big data, it will simply lead to poor results. And that can create two things or bring us to two things. The first one is a clash between the high velocity of big data, because big data is being collected today fastly in a very huge speed. But compared to that, the strategic decision-making process is slow. So there is a clash between these two things. A high velocity of big data being collected compared to a lower process in the strategic decision making. Secondly, there is a mismatch between the forward-looking strategic decision making and big data. Because big data focuses on the past, get information from that, and even can predict the data. But unfortunately, there is a mismatch between this forward-looking strategy that we can see in the big data and the way that decision makers can make decisions. So this is about the second category. Now, the third one is the responsibility and control. So companies are more aware of the impact of big data on their decision making today, and they could clearly see the advantage of using it. So some prefer to create a kind of partnership with other stakeholders that can help them to use this data in making decisions. So these were the findings. So what can we conclude so far? Well, this research explored the possibility of using big data and how it can have effects on broad level decision making in an organization. The knowledge and then the understanding that you have got so far from this paper focuses on areas for development as it relates to the essence of grouping of each of the three levels of the analysis that you have seen so far. And it was also discovered that at the level of the individual directors, there is a gap that exists between analytical efficacies in which organization or that the organization possesses to handle big data. And secondly, it was discovered that at the level of the board level itself, there is a broad coherence, and that is unsettled by big data, which has effects for decision making itself. And these directors or managers, yes, they are under pressure as they are trying to cope with this information, this data, and to cope with changes that are also coming. And because the time scale that is being given them is kind of short, so they try their best in introducing new techniques and new approaches that they can use, and hopefully that can help in making good decisions. Now, the discussion. This research highlights the important insight and how big data can be used in making decisions. And you have seen that there are some limitations because of the qualitative nature of the research. And also there is a fear that because the research was based on interview being conducted with respondents that were company managers or directors, there could be some biases because of their personal agenda. But nevertheless, the approaches or the theory behind the whole paper being used and the methodology being used are kind of consistent. And the second data also that was collected also helps to validate the finding being made. And it was also very good that the team of these researchers suggested that further research are made in order to examine the different impact of big data on board level decision making. And they should extend this research on various range of industry sectors. So this is what we can say so far about how big data can be used in making decisions